These in Orach Chaim HaKodesh, we always mention whenever we learn the parasha of Shlach L'cha Anoshim. So the Chazal say Shlach L'cha, meaning I've already told them what it is, but I allow you to authorize the sending of the spies. Shlach L'cha, I've already told them what it's all about. If you choose to send them, you could send them. So that's the Chazal. The Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains, Moshe, because in Mitzrayim he had asked a question which was not the appropriate question. He asked Hashem, Loma re'osa loma zeh shlachtoni. Why did you cause things to become more difficult rather than easier? So Hashem responds, Ato tireh. Now you will see the redemption. So the inference of Ato tireh means now, but bringing the Jews into Canaan, you're not going to. So meaning from that moment onward, Moshe wasn't meant to bring close to Canaan because it was an inappropriate question. So how do you reconcile with the striking of the rock? Separate discussion, but that's Chazal. So the Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains, if the Jews wouldn't have wandered for 40 years in the desert due to the sin of the Meraglim, they would have gone to Canaan immediately. If they would have gone to Canaan immediately, that means Moshe would have passed away 39 years before he actually passed away. Being under the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu for an additional 39 years, the value of that is something which is unequaled. So what Hashem had said to Moshe, Shlach L'cha, it's in your best interest. I've already told him what it's about, but it's in your best interest, but he didn't explain what it was all about, that you should send them. Because if they fail, which they are destined to fail because their request is inappropriate, you're going to live another 39 years. So it's in your interest they should go and fail, because being under your leadership, they'll be at a different level, rather than if you pass away now and go in and you're sure taking over now, it will not be the same Jewish people. This is how Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains Shlach L'cha. It's in your interest to send them because you'll ultimately be the beneficiary and they will be the beneficiaries because they'll be under your tutelage and under your leadership for all these additional years. That's the Orach Chaim HaKodesh. Now the question is, if the Jews themselves that were at a level that they would have gone in, I mean, it's better to sin and not be worthy and to be under Moshe's leadership rather than go in and not sin. So Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains, the Jews were not at that level. Sometimes a person, if he's not challenged, he's not going to fail. But if he would be challenged, he would fail. As a result of that, factually, he's not at that level where he should be at. The only reason why he didn't fail because Hashem didn't challenge him. The Jews themselves at this point were not at the level where they could have been in terms of their level of belief and faith. Proof of the pudding was they were challenged, they failed, distorting Meraglim. It's only because they had the challenge they failed. But if they wouldn't have the challenge, at what level would have they been? They weren't at that special level. Therefore, they needed Moshe's leadership and influence. And he should be the one to create that atmosphere for an additional 39 years, that even if they fail, they'll be a different Jewish people. They go in now, even though they didn't transgress, they're going to go in, but they're going to go in at a much lesser level. But now that the challenge for the sake of you leading them for an additional 39 years, they're going to be a different Jewish people. Therefore, it's in your best interest that you should not veto it, that you should allow them to go, because by your life being extended, they'll be under your influence for these additional years. That's the understanding. Perak Yimol Shlach Posuk V'Yoshuv Mitura Oretz. They returned from scouting out the land. Miketz Arboim Yom. after 40 days. They scouted out the land in 40 days, which is miraculous. We find that when we left Mitzrayim, we left Egypt, there was a thing called Kfitz Saderech. Within moments, the whole class were transported 130 miles to be able to leave when we were meant to leave. The Meraglim, they were able to fully scout out the land, see every aspect of the land in 40 days, which is an impossibility. It was miraculous. What Hashem performed this miracle for these people? So they should get back quicker with evil reports. Is that the reason? It would have taken longer. Why did Hashem allow this Kfitz Saderech? It's interesting. The Gemara says, it tells us in the Hedron, very rarely in the history of the world was the Kfitz Saderech. One of the times, the first time there's Kfitz Saderech, when Eliezer went to find a wife for Yitzchok, it says that the day he left, he arrived. It was more than a day's trip. But it was crucial that he should negotiate the hand of Rivka, the future matriarch, that he should negotiate it with Rivka's family and come back. Because we find when he came back, literally, the timing was perfect. As he came back, Yitzchak was returning from Har Moriah, from Mount Moriah after 3 years, after the Akedah. And as they met, he took her immediately as a wife. That was Kfitz Saderech. When we left Egypt, it was Kfitz Saderech. There was this miraculous miracle that we covered this extensive distance in moments. Here they're going to do a sin. And the spies, to bring them back quicker, what sealed the fate of the Jews quicker. Therefore, it took less time. Hashem performed the miracle in 40 days. They're able to scatter out the whole land. So why? So this Rashi over here explains, cites the Chazal, the Medrash. Valo arba meus parsa al arba meus parsa. The land itself, what they had to cover was 400 parsa by 400 parsa. A parsa is 3 miles. That means it was 1,200 miles by 1,200 miles. Malachot and Beidi Esem Parsos Leom. Harei Mahalach Arboim Yom in Mizuch Lamarov. Veim Holchu Orko Barochbo. They covered the breadth and the length of the land. It should have taken a lot longer. So why did Hashem perform this miracle that he covered in a short amount of time? Ultimately, what was the decree? For every day that they scattered out the land with this negative eye, through this negative lens, we paid a year. 40 days you spied out the land. We spent 40 years wandering in the desert. Therefore, Hashem performed this miracle that they should cover the extent of the land in a shorter period of time, so we should not wander all those years beyond the 40 years. So he performed the miracle of Kfitz Saderech that we should wander to a lesser degree than to a greater degree. So it's not to bring the fate sooner. That fate is going to happen. But the degree of fate, what they needed for Kapara, would be 40 years rather than beyond 40 years. Therefore, there was Kfitz Saderech. There was this miracle that they were able to cover this greater amount of distance in a lesser amount of time for this reason. Because ultimately, after 40 years, it was important for them to go into Eretz Yisrael. The new generation, they were ready for real time. Not to delay that entry, therefore the decree was 40 days, which would turn out to be 40 years. Rashi says, why did it take only 40 days? It should have taken longer, because they would have paid the price. We would have wanted longer. And Hashem wanted that the liability should be a lesser of a liability. Therefore, they only wanted for 40 years, not longer. So they should be able to go into Eretz Yisrael after 40 years. Otherwise, it would have been extended. Okay? The spies spied out the land. They spied out the land with this jaundiced eye, looking for evidence to condemn Hashem. So every day they looked for that evidence, that mindset, that process is Chil Hashem every moment of that process. If they would have been involved longer, it would have been extended beyond that to Chil Hashem. Therefore, Hashem only wanted, he minimized the time of Chil Hashem So therefore, the consequence should be a lesser consequence. They should pass away after 40 years, not for the 40 days, rather than beyond 40 days, because every day is a year. Now, the question is, this is my question. If the Meraglim themselves had the jaundice eye, and they are the cause of the problem, they come back with these ominous reports, just a simple understanding. The Jews bought into it. They bought into it. What was the degree of their failing? Their failing was Chil Hashem. Just because the spies spied out the land for 40 days, why did they have to die for 40 years? If Chil Hashem is enough reason they should die, let them die immediately. If it's severe enough. And if it's not severe enough in their own right, why 40? What does the Meraglim's 40 days have to do with their passing away, perishing over a 40-year period? You understand my question? Mark, you hear what I'm asking? Somehow we're linking the 40 days of the Meraglim to the level of culpability of the Jewish people. There for 40 years, you're going to wander. What is the claim against them? Lack of trust. That's it. Which is Chil Hashem. The way they behaved is Chil Hashem as a reaction of these reports. So because they spied 40 days, those 40 days is the basis for your reaction response. Therefore, for 40 years, you're going to wander. What is 40? They're 40 days. You wander, you're dying because of Chil Hashem. The Meraglim, we understand why they deserve that, because for 40 days, they had that jaundiced eye looking for evidence to condemn God. Okay? What does that do with the Jews? It says they went and they came. El Moshe Velaro. They went to Canaan, they returned. El Moshe Aaron, Vel Kol Adas Bnei Yisrael Midbar Poran Kodesho. They came back to Moshe Aaron, the whole Adas Bnei Yisrael, to the Paran Desert, Kodesho. Vayoshivu Osam Dover Eskoleido. And they returned with all this information before the whole congregation. Vayarum is prioritz. They showed them samples of the fruits of the land, which were of abnormal size. Let's see Rashi. It should say they returned. It says Vayashuvu or Vayavo. What's Vayelchu? What does it speak about? They're going and returning. Mal Vayelchu lahakish halichos l'biyosam. To equate the going to the return. Ma biyosam be'etzatova. Just as when they left with this jaundiced eye, with this cabal between them, the 10. Just as when they returned with the jaundice, with these ominous reports, when they left Eitzerah. When they left with this intent to a discovery to find evidence to condemn Hashem. It's not only when they came there, they realized it was not what Hashem said it would be, but even going, they went already with this mindset to confirm their suspicions of distrust. Therefore, it speaks Vayelcho. So we hear the Orcham Kodesh asks the famous question. We find when God chose them, it says Anoshim. You should choose Anoshim. And who are these Anoshim? Anoshim, that term always refers to people at Tzadikim or Ksherim. That Tzadikim. So if they're Tzadikim, so how does it say over here that when they were chosen, when they left, they're ready with Rishoyim? God says these people are tzaddikim. That's the Orchaim HaKosh's question. And here the Torah is saying that even when they left for the mission, 10 of them already had this mindset to find evidence to keep this negative intent to condemn God. That's the Orchaim HaKosh's question. So the Orchaim HaKosh answers what Alan alluded to, which I didn't let him say it fully, that when they were chosen, before they were the representatives of each tribe, before there was that linkage, they were tzaddikim. The moment they linked to the people they were representing, immediately they were affected negatively. Of course, they had choice. Once they had that linkage, since we have a concept of shlich shom kamoso, that the agent is the equivalent of the one he represents, It's more than just I represent you. That linkage causes an influence between the one you represent and who you are. Because of that linkage, therefore they had this jaundiced eye, and it created a level of suspicion within them, lack of trust, that when they went now was to find evidence to condemn God. So the 40 days they scattered out every moment that they went with that jaundiced eye to find evidence against Hashem, that was due to the people they were representing. As a result of that, the level of culpability, of liability, was Chil Hashem. But for how many days was that Chil Hashem being perpetrated that ultimately brought it about? It was a 40-day process. So Hashem says, if it would take longer, that means the Chil Hashem, the process is more than 40 days. And since the basis for that is who they're representing, they would have to wander for more than 40 years. Therefore, Hashem miraculously allowed them to cover the whole land in 40 days, that the level of punishment should be 40 years, not go beyond 40 years for that reason.